I'm notorious for not keeping up to time, and it's 1:29, so I'm going to not keep up to time, but actually be in front of it. So welcome to it. But yeah, that's right, mate. I'll get my points across, Andy. But look, before we start, James, could I invite you to say a karakia? It'd be great to start the meeting with that on that sort of basis, guys. Oh, there's me laughing now. Okay, that's right. I'll turn it.
Kia ora tātou, kia inoi tātou. E te atua ho mai kia mātou te wairua Māori e ki ngā mea e kore e taia e mātou te whakarere ke. Ho mai te manawanui ki ngā mea e taia ne mātou te whakarere ke. Ho mai te maramatanga kia mātou ai mātou ko tehia ka uhia mātou e runga I te moto tātou ara ki a ihu Kraiti. God grant us the serenity to accept the things we cannot change, the courage to change the things we can, and most of all the wisdom to know the difference. Amen.
Am I going to create problems? I don't want to go through the whole meeting. Are we okay now? Oh, sweet. Okay, that's good. That's good. James, yes, James, thank you for that. That's tremendous. It's a lovely way to start the meeting. And yes, let's change what we can, but also accept that what is and some things we can't. Look, I thought it was useful if I could just take 5 minutes of your time before I get to the agenda, just to, I guess, create a couple of things that are really important, I believe, in the life of the committee, in which various ways I covered a wee bit with some of you last time, but actually, which I think, given we're in the formal part of the committee, would be really useful to have. Last week I was in Wellington speaking. I was on a panel for the Society of Local Government Managers on risk management, and I was asked what were the key things that make an audit committee work. So I thought I should tell you what those 4 things are, because they're what I look for in any of the committees that I'm involved in. So you bear with me. These are probably in an increasing order of importance. So that means I'm starting with, they're all important, but I'm starting with the least going to the most important, okay? So here we go. Firstly, risk. We call ourselves an audit and risk committee, and risk in itself sounds like it has a negative connotation, because actually risk is acknowledging that things can go wrong. And that's true. So in that sense, there is a dimension to risk which is negative. But we are interested in risk, what for? We're interested in risk because we want to achieve our objectives, and that is really positive. We start as a risk committee by thinking about what we want to achieve. Hence, thinking what might stop us from achieving that, which is called risk, is a really positive aspect of management and governance. So I'd like us to recognise that we're here first and foremost to achieve what it is that you want to achieve for the community of Gisborne. Second thing is I intend and hope to enable within the time we've got to allow as much discussion as possible. I don't know if anybody in the room would want to put up their hands and admit to the reading of ISO 31000, which is the standard on risk. You have, David, you can put your hand up. Well done, buddy, if you have. And that's the standard, actually, which professionally we're trying to hold ourselves account to in terms of risk management. And the bottom line of ISO 31000 is communication. And this is a venue for discussing risk. It's a venue, actually, for you to discuss risk. And therefore, I need to hear your voice. If we're going to sit for 3 hours and we don't spend at least an hour of that talking risk, we aren't doing our work. So while we have an agenda in front of us, and that's important, and we'll get through the agenda, we need to consider the quality of of what we do in it, which will be dictated by the time we spend in conversation. The third thing I've got down here is it's actually a room where we should have constructive tension. Okay, what's constructive tension? There's actually governors, including myself as your independent member, testing management that we can have confidence that risk is managed. So we should be prepared to ask the hard questions. But there's a lot that goes with that needs to be unpacked. I'm saying to you as counsellors, and myself actually, that we have the right to ask all questions and to expect an honest response from management. But I would ask a couple of things. Firstly, that you make the environment safe. So I want an honest answer back from any of management that are sitting around here, but it should be safe for them to do so. How do we make it safe? We play the issue and not the man, or the lady, or the person, whatever is the right word there today. Okay? That becomes really important. The second thing is, one thing I would ask you as committee members, I know this sounds a bit preachy, but the one thing I would ask you to do is all as committee members and management is to hold respect for one another. One of the things I've learned about life is no person comes to work to do a bad job. They actually come for very positive reasons. So we should hold that true, respect, playing the issue, but therefore enabling us to have the constructive tension we need to have inside the committee. My fourth point, and so I'm coming to the biggest point that I hold, is a simple saying. I see some of you taking notes, write this down. If in doubt, go up. Be strategic. This is the most critical rule for an audit and risk committee. Our work is not to dive down into management's job. We are to think seriously about the big risks that affect this community. We've only got time. We only meet 5 times a year. We have got to think about the big risks that are related to our objectives. So if you're sitting there thinking, should I or should I not ask this question? It's my advice. If in doubt, go up. Think strategic. Okay, I hope that's okay. Those are my sort of reasonably simple rules, if I can call them rules. I know the standing orders, but if I can give you a sense of how I'm keen to see it done today, and indeed for the meetings that I chair, I'm really keen that we live by that. By the way, if any of you have chosen to write that down, an open offer from me, I've got to live by those rules as well. So if you believe that I'm not, I'm big enough, I've got big enough shoulders, and will be quick enough to recognise the error of my ways. So if you feel like that's not working, I'm not chairing you right, give me a yell, and that's fine. Final thing is, having made a career as an auditor, I guess I'm technically here to, or have been in the role of upholding standards. To be honest, I hate process. I hate standing orders. I do love good discussion. So I'm not quite certain whether it's Nadine or whether it's Kroll over here that keeps me on order. If we are out of step in terms of standing orders, please give me a yell. Let's get it right. But otherwise, I would like some informality. I've introduced myself to all of you as Bruce. I'm pretty certain I've got everybody's first name down off pat. Personally, I like to be called Bruce. If you want to call me Chair, that's fine. I don't have any trouble with that. But if you call me equally Bruce, that is absolutely fine. I would like to achieve that. So, hey, look, that sounds a bit like a preachy lesson from the top, but I thought at least I might as well let you guys know what I think really counts and where we're going to. Okay, so that's my sort of comment. Let's deal actually with the agenda. Unless anybody wants to make any comments at this stage. Oh, sorry, there was one other thing. You look at it, terrible, isn't it? I have asked Nadine that we have management sitting with us at the table all the time. Another Robertsonism is that leadership is the product equals governance and management sitting together. Governance by itself doesn't equal leadership. Governance is no good unless it's got good management behind it. Equally, management can't go anywhere unless governance provides a strategic direction. So leadership for us in the area of risk is having both us as governors and Nadine and her team when they are present around the table. So to Nadine, you, and to the guys at the end of the table, I encourage you to be fully, and Pauline here, I encourage you to be fully part of the conversation as well. I would welcome that, and that's really important to me. Oh, and James, sorry, there's more management here than there are councillors, there we go. And it's not a surprise that it should be that way, but I am very encouraging that we treat this as one. We don't have any policy making ability. We are here only to recommend. Therefore, it's a great venue where we can practice leadership by being around the one table. Red, I'm sorry about that. Perhaps I should just refer to you as Mayor. I don't mind those being my rules. I'm not trying to carve the way in which you do or don't carry the stuff, but that's how I'd like to do it, if that's okay. Right. Can I just look at the agenda, please, just to give you an indication of where we're going? There are really two parts to the agenda today. There is the agenda, firstly, as you have written on the papers as circulated. Once we have gone through that, I would like us then to complete that meeting, and then we're just going to convene a relatively short workshop where we have some invited guests in the form of Gisborne Holding Limited, who are just coming to see us briefly to discuss matters around Gisborne Holding. Also, I've asked Nadine just to look at a couple of things, plus I just want to talk about the audit, actually, the external audit. There's a couple of things that need to be done there. So we're going to follow the formal agenda as it's set out there, and then believe we'll just reconvene with a short workshop after that. Right, let's go for it, shall we? So I guess the first thing is apologies. Do we have any apologies? We haven't got Josh here. Can we, pardon? So we record one for Josh. Is anybody else that we should be doing? So look, I'd move from the chair that we sustain that apology. Thank you, Red. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Those against, thank you. Declarations of interest. Anybody, is there any matter here that either requires a specific declaration of interest or a general one? No? We're fine, that's great. Acknowledgements and tributes. This is a new one on me. That's not one that I've normally had on an agenda, but that's fine. Do we have anybody that we should acknowledge or give tribute to in the course of this meeting? No? Well done for turning up. I appreciate it that you're here, so that's great. Leave of absence. I don't know if we need to worry about that at this stage. Anybody need to apply for leave of absence? We're great, cracker. Public input and petitions. Do we have any received? I haven't been informed of any, so I make an assumption there are none. I haven't been informed of any extraordinary business, but do people want to raise anything at this stage that we should or could consider as part of this meeting? No? Cracker. Similarly, I haven't been informed of any notices of motions, so I think we're free of those as well. Okay, that's good. And adjourned business, I don't have any adjourned business either. So this is the first of the new tronium. I would have been surprised. Okay. So we have quite a meaty little bit of an agenda here. They are all good topics, and I think it will be a good entertaining afternoon. Am I overstating the case, Pauline? I don't know. Let's go. We'll see. We'll see. I'm excited. I'm excited because we're actually joined not only by staff for the first item on insurance, but also we've got an external in the form of Matthew sitting over in the wings here. So, look, could I call for the presentation of the first paper 8.1 on the insurance renewal process? Thank you. And I think it's going to be, is it Simon speaking or is Katie speaking? Simon's going to speak to it? Come on up, mate. You've got to come up here. There's only one place for people. Matthew, welcome to the chamber. Matthew and I were just working out that we actually see a lot of each other by going around various councils. They make us carpetbaggers, I suppose. But anyway, here we go. So look, Simon, if there's any sort of opening comment you'd like to make, but then I think we'll follow pretty quickly into Matthew giving us his take, and then I will open it up for conversation.
I don't have any opening comments per se. Matthew will introduce himself and his role in the Botblas group and how he is helping to fulfill our insurance needs as part of that group. And after he's presented, we will then open the floor for questions on the report in more detail.
Thank you. Sorry, just Matthew, in starting, perhaps, are you happy to take questions as you go through your presentation?
Absolutely. You hate process, I hate death by PowerPoint. So please, it's a necessary evil to allow some points to be put out. It's not sitting there in silence. So please feel free to ask any question at any stage.
Thank you, Matthew. Welcome.
Okay. First of all, thank you for the invite to come down. I spoke with Simon about a few topics that he would like us to cover off in terms of putting some context around the current insurance program, the current insurance market primarily. And I will go through those. There are a couple of additional items that won't appear on the slides purely for the reason that we discussed them earlier on. I'm going to add to those just to cover them off. Insurance is risk transfer. I picked up on what Bruce was saying earlier on. Insurance is a risk transfer mechanism. Risk is something that's all around us. We can't hide from it. The question we have to ask from an insurance point of view is how much risk do you want to transfer and at what cost? That seems a very simplistic approach. It's actually quite a complicated end space to get to. So as a bit of background, Aon are in the local government space in New Zealand. We're the largest broker. We act for over 60 local authorities in one form or another. Our position in that space has grown over the last 10, 12 years because of success that we have had in the LAS approach. And I was specifically asked to talk about this. You are part of a share procurement, BOTLAS. And insurance is one of those items that is in the share procurement. And that brings to you a number of benefits, chiefly economies of scale. We are going to insurance markets asking to buy lots of cover with multiple parties involved, as in the LAS member councils. The geographic spread that is attached to that is very beneficial as well, because you're not focusing all the assets in one space. And whilst Gisborne is tricky to get to, it also has an absolute advantage from the point of view of accumulation of losses and how a major impact would affect this part of New Zealand. A major event would affect this part of New Zealand. So that works in your favour as well. The LAS approach also allows us to secure market capacity in a hard market, because you are going in with other local authorities to the market. Hopefully, as I say, questions at any stage, please, if there's anything. Absolutely.
Go for it, Larry.
Why would the other 12 councils and 672 local authorities, why would the other 12 not be involved? And for whatever reason would they not be involved?
Historic reasons, and we're working on that. The LAS initiatives are, not all councils are in a LAS program.
Yeah.
So that's something that is being discussed, because there are obviously benefits. So it's just historic, largely. Okay.
Some of it will be some of the bigger ones that have gone themselves.
Well,
or is that changing?
that's changing, but the other point to that is you don't necessarily want to be involved with an Auckland or a Wellington. So whilst the LAS works for regional, the sort of outlying parts, you don't want to be attached to an Auckland or a Wellingtons because they skew the risk profile. So it's about getting it right for you, but where it works best for you guys. Okay. So, look, I'm not going to read all of that. I've got 10 minutes and I am terrible at overrunning on presentations. What is the driving factor in the material damage, business interruption, infrastructure space for the insurance market? We are in a hardening market. Rates are going up. Globally, it's weather-related events. Whether we want to admit to it, accept it, something is happening with the weather globally. Australia, California, it's not a question of if there's going to be a wildfire, it is when is it going to take place and how bad is it going to be. Storms, floods, tsunamis, all of those things are happening with greater frequency and greater cost. Why does that affect you in New Zealand? Well, unfortunately, we're talking about global capacity, we're talking about global insurers, so anything we do here is affected by global markets. And we are seeing it in New Zealand as well. I may not have this number 100% correct because it's still being worked out. The Timaru hailstorm, recently Timaru Oamaru hailstorm, I think it's about $150 million, there or thereabouts. So please don't quote me exactly on that number. That's a sort of ballpark number. So you can see how these events.
It's across both the local and public sector.
Correct, yeah. But this all impacts on the market. So let's put a bit more context around that. These are where the events have taken place and they've happened. Sorry, turning my back on you. There's an interesting statistic in there that Asia Pacific with 17 events led the region. Most of the Asia Pacific region has had since 2013. So there is changes taking place, things are happening. That's the driver for why we are seeing increases in global insurance premiums in that material damage space. Sorry, I'm just going to check what we got next. Probably your biggest premium spend is on your infrastructure insurance program. This is in relation to your, we call it 3 waters, water reticulation services. There is currently in place a cost sharing arrangement with central government. We call it MACDEM, it goes by a number of names. If you as an authority can evidence to MACDEM that you have taken steps to either insure or self-fund your assets to a degree, then they will contribute at the moment up to 60% of the costs of an event. So 60-40. So what we do for you and for lots of other local authorities is we go off to the insurance markets and buy 40% cover. Now, that's quite an important number because everybody speaks, and certainly in the report that you've got in front of you that's been done, everybody talks in 100% terms. So where we talk about there being a limit under your program of $250 million from an insurance point of view, we are actually only buying insurance for 40% of that number because central government should be contributing the other 60%. Okay?
Excuse me, do they only contribute if we keep the asset up to standard? You made a comment earlier, you said something, I can't remember the words, where you said they will contribute up to 60%. I'm sure you said something that implied if we look after an asset.
Sorry, the wording is that you have to take some steps to ensure or have a fund or some mechanism of contributing that 40% of it. Okay. No, just to have a method that some councils have some money and they'll use that money to be able to deal with their 40%. Other councils don't have money, they rely on insurance as a risk transfer mechanism to do that for them. Okay. Or it's a strategic decision to do it that way. The infrastructure program is largely placed out of the London markets. There isn't an appetite in New Zealand to do that, so we go offshore. And the offshore markets, because of the previous slides in terms of the impacts of climate change, et cetera, they're getting a lot more selective in what they will write and the price. It's simplistically, it's supply and demand. So one of the key things that needs to be done is quality of information that goes to them, level of asset detail, making sure that because you are in a competitive market vying for capital that other people are after, we have to differentiate why you are a good risk, why you know your risk better than other people who are going to that market.
Another question.
Of course. No.
Talking about the New Zealand market not having the appetite, isn't that just a alarm to the overseas market that our own market won't, that we're such a high risk?
No, that is, how can I was at a meeting yesterday with some London underwriters. They'd come out to New Zealand and they did a presentation. This was to a group of South Island councils, and they said they are impressed with what the New Zealand market, the New Zealand clients are doing in terms of asset management, data, provision of information. They are prepared to write this stuff, and they want to continue writing it, but we need to improve the quality of information. It does not send alarm bells to them that the local markets can't do it, because they know the local markets don't necessarily have the capacity or the appetite to do it. It's not because it is uninsurable. It is because that particular domestic market, it's not on their portfolio of stuff. They would rather put their capital into insuring the cornered areas as opposed to insuring a large infrastructure risk. So it's all about their own internal risk appetite as well. We have always been involved in the London markets because London has a history of writing stuff domestic markets won't write. That's what they're there for. They've been there doing that for 300 years. I can't remember the exact date Lloyd started, but that's what they're there for. That's why we utilise them. Okay. One of the key things is going to see them. Very briefly, Lloyd's basically is lots and lots of markets and lots of underwriters. We don't insure all of your assets with one underwriter. It's spread across lots of underwriters, so each party is only responsible for a relatively small amount of the loss. You need to build relationships with these people. They need to understand what you do as an organisation and how you do it. So we go to the markets and we take a representative from the various LAS groups with us. It is absolutely essential that that is maintained. If you were to go into the London markets with no previous relationship with them, as a distressed purchaser, your premium costs are going to increase. You are not in that position. You have a relationship with them already. Okay. And they are prepared to support existing clients. They know who you are. They know about you. They'll continue dealing with you. Okay. What I haven't said on there, which I will talk about, and it's because it's referenced in here, is the liability market is different. So this stuff is a huge risk for you in terms of dollar values. You know, we have a large earthquake, got a huge amount of asset damaged. We're talking big dollars. The biggest operational day-to-day risk, in my opinion, that a council has is just doing your normal day-to-day stuff. We are seeing an increase in litigation in New Zealand. There is an emergence of litigation funders. These are third parties who will pay for the legal costs to take you to court, basically. And about, well, I can't give you an exact number, but the vast majority of claims that we see in the liability space are all around building, consenting, that whole process. I can say certain things because it's in the public domain. Tauranga City Council, the Bella Vista development, significant claim. Now, that is impacting the entire market. And it's not just councils, to be fair. That's impacting the entire market. But particularly with the building management component, or sorry, the building consenting component, insurers are very nervous about some of that stuff. So the liability market at the moment is also a hard market, and there was quite a large adjustment to premiums last year in that space, and we're seeing a continued small increase in those premiums. That is a whole topic of conversation that I can't cover off in 10 minutes, but I just wanted to put something out there. It's an area that is concerning, but there are solutions to that.
I think the issue, the key point you're making is that the underwriters look at things from quite right experience around the country. There is so much more activity. Oh, sorry. Thank you, Emma. Number one correction. I owe everybody a chocolate fish nugget. Sorry, thank you. So I've got it on, haven't I? I'll put it on now. Thank you. Andy, you've got a question? Oh, did you? Sorry, and I probably revved it on. I was just probably reinforcing what Matthew said, given I get around a good number of councils in an assurance and risk basis, that the liability market, the preparedness of Kiwis to resort to action on our business as usual, and particularly the consenting, is undoubtedly a lot higher and more active, which is only reflecting what I think you're saying to us, Matthew, that the underwriters are saying, oh, we've got a problem here, it's going to cost more. Sorry about that, Amber.
That's all right. How big is the top end? Like you always hear Lloyd's and that. I mean, are they concerned about their balance sheets with what's happening globally? Because what you look at the Australian fires and things that are huge amounts, taking up huge amounts to pay out, and things that happen here, which probably just scale of size and that, our disasters on that scale aren't as big. But are we sort of having to subsidise into these things because so much is happening globally on such a huge scale?
The short answer is not subsidising per se, but being rated more technically on what is the exposure. Lloyd's have started a process called the Decile 10, where the managing, so as I said, Lloyd's is a market, so there's lots of players, and the market is governed by Lloyd's. They've got an Audit and Risk Committee. And Lloyd's have said, and I think that, again, don't quote me exactly on the dates, I think it started 12 months ago, maybe a bit longer. Lloyd's said to the syndicates, you've got to get rid of the worst 10% of your book. You are writing stuff which isn't sustainable and is having a negative impact. So Lloyd's underwriters have actively been walking from accounts. There are then increased other pressures on global capacity supply, which my 10 minutes won't allow me to go into, and I'm not trying to avoid that. But this is why this whole point about going there, seeing them, differentiating yourselves. But the short answer to your question is, yes, there are insurers who are being far more selective in what they underwrite. And they need more information, they need more data, they need more confidence in what's coming to them. And they need to know that the numbers that are being declared are correct. So that if they look at a schedule that says you've got X $100 million worth of assets and we were to have an earthquake, we do loss modelling, people work out what the impact of that earthquake would be. They don't want any surprises, neither do you. So if the loss modelling suggests that you might have a loss of 100 million on $500 million worth of total assets, then they know where the capacity is that they've got to pitch and how much that's going to cost. So, but yes, there's a squeeze, it's happening. Yeah. Okay. And that sort of leads into this. Thank you. We don't just see London markets. Last year, we also went to Singapore to see if there was any additional capacity there. And we will probably be looking at additional offshore markets as well. So again, this comes down to the quality of data, asset management systems. They need to understand what you're doing with your assets, how you're looking after your assets. If you take some simplistic stuff, and again, I don't know the specificity of your network, if you've got a whole bundle of older pipes that are brittle, that don't perform well, what are you doing about a renewal program to put HDPE pipes in that are more flexible and ductile and will perform better in the event of an earthquake, for example? And that's the sort of information that we ask for and request. Okay. By also maintaining those continued relationships with your current markets and investigating relationships in other offshore markets, you're future-proofing the program. We're ensuring there is going to be capacity there and an appetite there. So it's constantly evolving. Okay. Was this? I think that was it. Yeah, that was me done. I was given 10 minutes and I've probably overrun that and I pressed all the buttons. Is there any other questions around that from context of, any questions at all, in fact, that people want to ask in an insurance space?
Mr. Ed, go for it.
I've got a question. When I look at this paper, I assume that all other local authorities would be in the same boat where we talk about a 20% increase on what we have to pay for our premium, because they would have nearly the same assets and the same issues. But when I look at it, insurance, obviously Aon and yourself go out to get the best deal possible for us, but it's not really optional if you want to take it or not. The insurance companies know that we have to take on a certain percentage of insurance. So in a certain way, we're with our backs against the wall because we have to insure, and you do your best to get the best deal for us. But it still feels to me, this is not, this is just a noting paper. I think, yes, whatever the market says to us will be the increase, and we have this increase creep every year. It is a big concern that the cost will just balloon and balloon, and we can't really say no thank you, because we do need it as well, and we recognize that risk. But it sometimes do feel like it's not really a choice that you have to take it.
In some ways, yes, you're right. We are a price taker, and we are subject to the whims of the global disaster market, if you like, subject to disasters happening all around the world. But I think through Aon, our insurances are placed with a panel of insurers, and they will allocate across that panel where they think the best value sits as well. So it's not just with one insurer. There is a panel of insurers, and the business is split across them. So there is a measure of, I guess, competition in that respect. That's a fair comment, Matthew?
Yeah, absolutely. One of the key things we have to there's two answers to that question, if I may. If I carry on, you know what I'm going to say. Yeah. Yes, we have to keep competitive tension. Otherwise, it'll just be an incremental. And that comes back to economies of scale, value of premium that we put into the market, and the ability we have to negotiate with the market, which is why the whole LAS thing works for you. The second point to that, and this is a body of work which I know Council are looking at reviewing, is an insurance strategy. Actually a risk strategy more than anything. How much insurance do you need? And again, it's more than a 10-minute conversation, but I did an audit and risk years ago, and somebody said, so what you're saying is we need to be a more discerning buyer. Now that is a big subject. What's your risk appetite like as an organisation? You're risk tolerant, you're risk adverse. What does your balance sheet look like? How much can you keep to your own book? Do you only want to go and buy just the essential insurances? Would you replace all of your assets or not? Would you replace them differently? I mean, the list goes on, and absolutely, you get a 25% increase year on year on year on year. Before you know where you are, it's a 100% increase and it's unaffordable. So there is a whole conversation that needs to take place and will start taking place, which I think Simon alludes to in this paper, about a more strategic approach to some of this. And it may be at the end of the day that the best risk transfer mechanism is to pay the insurance premium. That may be the net result. It may also be that actually we don't need to buy so much, or we buy it differently, or we look at a different way of dealing with it. Resilience to networks, longevity of networks, it's a big topic. But yes, it's an option.
Ember.
This puts asset management in a different light. Given that we have to have 30-year asset management plans, do we have really high-quality asset management information? That's fine. I'm talking about all councils. I'm not talking specifically about us, but in New Zealand.
I think it could be, if I put what the insurers say to us, the underwriters say to us, they would like to see it better. I don't actually know, if I'm honest with you, what that looks like at the moment, but they say these comments. Valuations, are they adequate? Are they correct? Are they fit for purpose? And this is a general comment. It could be any organisation, any industry, not just local authorities. And then asset management, absolutely.
I would add to that in that we do have, I guess, a renewed focus on asset management and the staff to push and increase our maturity in asset management, especially over the last few years. We've been putting a lot of effort into the data and making sure that it's all making sense. And provides the basis for sound insurance decisions. So it's a maturity that's building.
And Amber, we will have a chance to discuss that later this afternoon if you, with our papers.
I just add a comment to that. I've just seen a really good connectivity between what we do that I've never seen before. I didn't think of asset management and infrastructure and insurance
Good.
actually all come together.
Good.
So
Great.
yeah, thank you for that. I can't see.
Pat, you had a question.
Yes, I just wanted to ask about some of the bids, because it's been a while talking about some of the bids. If I look at the table in your paper, it says that no one's going to be insuring sort of fixed assets in the future. Relatively minor sum of money, but quite a bit of our assets are covered by insurance or within our infrastructure. So what actual aspect of some of the things and indemnity will we insuring anyway?
Good question.
I'll probably pass this over to Matthew because he's got more detail, but I won't put words in his mouth.
No, the historic policy that was in place was a somewhat limited cover. It's not talking about the asset itself. It's talking about costs associated with responding to the civil defence, and there were quite narrow definitions as to what the insurer would have paid as a result of that. So yes, it was cost you would have incurred, and I honestly cannot remember the exact wording now, but it would have been some of the ancillary costs that you would have incurred to respond to a civil defence emergency.
Can I ask the Chief Executive? Have we ever called on that aspect of our insurance? Not that I'm, well, not on my time. Okay.
No, I don't recall.
Yeah. Not need to.
Right, are there any more questions for Matthew? I wonder if I could just put my spin on, not spin on this, we're not the spin here, are we? Just read, I think you asked a really good question. I mean, everybody's asked good questions, but I liked your point, Matthew, that Gisborne has the advantage of being part of ALAS. We should not ignore that fact. But actually, I think a message that I've heard today is that we, as Gisborne, need to be a discerning buyer. Because actually, what I've heard you say, Matthew, is that the more we can be confident in our management and the way that you've drawn out, Amber, the connection between what we do on a day-to-day basis around things like asset management and understanding how our systems and asset base perform and the condition they're in and what we do to maintain or renew them helps us define better our risk profile, both with the LAS and more specifically on the open markets. So what it says is that yes, we are ultimately, as you've said, Simon, the price taker, but there is a lot from a risk management perspective we can do to manage the quantum. It might be a wee bit overstating the case, but certainly trying to make certain that the rates that we have to pay are as good as they can be in a market which otherwise we can't influence. Is that fair to say, Matthew?
Yes.
Cracker. Cracker. Yeah, go for it, Pat.
Thanks. Our forestry insurance, there's an element of public liability for people, and it doesn't look like public liability is included here. If we have a fire in our forest and it spreads to other people's land, that seems to be a relatively small amount of insurance on our forestry asset. And who insures the forest at Taupiparae, please? It's on the bottom of page 11 of 66.
My understanding is that the forestry insurance is to protect the value of the forests as it is growing, and that any public liability that may stem from a forest fire would be covered in the public liability insurance, which is our general public liability insurance.
Could we check that? Because as a forest owner with insurance, it's quite substantial and it doesn't seem to be covered here, but if it's covered within our public liability policy, then I'm happy about that. So can you get the answer for
I
us?
can confirm that now.
Thank you.
Question about the LAS. Can you choose which one you join? Like we have Bay plenty, but can we choose if we want to go with both? Oh, okay, thank you.
Right, thank you for that Matthew. I would actually like to just move it forward, and we've sort of started getting into the paper, but I think it would be useful if we have any particular queries. So firstly, again, Simon or, I think it's, sorry, I could check, it's Katie, isn't it? They've got, have co-authored the paper. Is there anything you'd like to add on the paper? Otherwise, I'm open to some questions, because I certainly have some questions on the paper. Is there anything that either of you would like to say about the paper before we consider that? No?
No,
Okay.
no.
Can I open the floor? Pat, I thank you for anticipating where I'm going, but you've already asked some clarifying questions. That's really good. Are there any questions people would like to ask about the actual paper? It is for noting, as you've already realised, and this is actually about the current insurance program we have actually purchased. Bearing in mind the next one is coming around reasonably soon for the 21-20 year. Yes, Ria.
We are on the paper now.
Yes, exactly. That's where I'm at. Yep.
So just going to the financial and budgets, where we state that we are nearly $100,000, or what we need to pay is $100,000 over budget. So I want to know from management where we're going to get the $100,000 from for this. 9 of 66. So that was one question I had. And then I also queried the corporate travel, where we say we include private overseas travel for all staff, which is on page 7. So those are the two things that I highlighted and thought it would be good to get some clarity on that. Thank you. On to the first question.
Overall, as you pointed out, it was more than budget, but we would have the expectation that if it is over budget, we would be, of all our costs, we would be working towards being with those budgets.
And then just a supplementary question on that. I assume going forward that it would be safe for us to now budget 25% over, at least 25% over what our insurance cost per annum is, because I don't see it slowing down anytime soon with the environmental effects, Matthew. So, you know, it's not going to get better. So it would be good for us going forward, when we plan, to budget 25% over the premium we have now, because it's, except the work we're going to do with our strategy and maybe be more discerning buyers going forward for our next 10-year plan, that's probably the type of considerations to take into account.
Yes, just the things that we usually do, we say, what is the market doing at that particular time, and we go into that, and we usually do put a higher rate, but not as high as 25%. We basically have had 6 to 8%, which is far more than any of the other percentages. So there is a little bit of a catch up with it, but we try to find out, is there any differences each year and that we need to improve.
Would you care to venture any thoughts on market movements in the big numbers? Is it 10, 15, 20, 25?
The big corrections have, in the MDBI space, the big corrections have been over the last 2 years, 2.5 years. Yeah, 10 or 15 points maybe, in terms of the MDBI for the coming 12 months would be there or thereabouts.
Material damage, just the acronym, unwinding.
Sorry, yes, I'm using insurance speak. Material damage and business interruption, MDBI, sorry, bad habit of mine. So yes, that's the material damage, so your above ground asset space, yeah, these buildings, etc. Yeah, between 10 and 15 would be a educated assumption, but there's a lot to happen between now and.
Yeah, Larry. Oh, sorry. There was a second question. Sorry, Ria.
Yeah.
Good question.
So, that changed because we were made aware of this as an additional benefit to staff. So, the process that we've put in place is that staff can, as a family, if they're travelling overseas, will pay $30. I think our memory is the amount that they pay for that benefit. And so it's quite a small increase in terms of the premium overall, like $2,200. And we get money from the staff to pay for that benefit as well. So that's why we took it forward as part of well.
Could be $175 claim or $200 claim. There's an order or head condition. No, if it's bad, it could be a good deal more than $30. The benefit.
That's right.
Oh, yes, to the claimant.
To the
Yes,
claimant, to
yes,
the
agreed.
individual.
Yes, agreed.
Cost of the policy, I'm not talking about any claim, I'm talking about the cost of the policy to this company for which someone is paying $30. Is that what I heard you say?
No, so if a staff member wants to take advantage of our policy, they will pay us $30. The benefit that they get from it will be, and we hope nothing would happen.
I'm not worried about the benefit, I'm just saying that if it's accurately costed, the cost of that travel premium, insurance could be a couple of $100.
No, it's, the amount is 2,500 for the whole policy for the whole year. And so if, for argument's sake, if then it says in the next 12 months, how many travel days, overseas travel days that you have, and you get that cost. And if it went up accordingly more than what we anticipated, then we look at the recovery that we need. But the whole premium is pretty low. Not many have at the moment.
Okay, are you comfortable with the answer? Yeah, thank you. Okay, are there any other questions? Oh, sorry, Larry, I think you were next in line, buddy.
Question. Is there any correlation between funding depreciation and the amount of insurance? I mean, the way I say that is because some councils obviously can't afford to pay for their depreciation, so obviously they are more at risk than a council that does fund its depreciation from the insurance. So is there any correlation to that at all?
If I answer that from an insurance perspective, you need to be insuring the asset for its replacement cost or a cost that you are comfortable with to allow you to replace that. You don't want to be insuring it for an optimized depreciated replacement cost or an indemnity cost, because what you will receive from the insurer if you lose that asset is what is shown in the property schedule. And if you need to replace that asset, then you need to be declaring the replacement cost. So depreciation from an insurance point of view has to be, it's a completely different conversation. We're looking purely at the replacement of your assets.
Right.
The critical thing I would take from the presentation this afternoon, Larry, is actually, are we doing our renewals? So it's actually, are we spending the right amount of money? Now, then we could have a discussion about depreciation, but I think the direct correlation is between actually what's our knowledge of our assets? Have we prioritised our spend, which will always be limited? Have we prioritised our spend appropriately so that we can hold out to the market, in this case the insurance market, let alone the community, that we are maintaining our assets appropriately? That's the first go. How we fund that becomes a different story. But the question is, are we spending the money right? Are there any other questions on the paper? Andy?
We've got a list of assets not insured on page 16, which is quite light. Firstly, I mean, is there things on a list like that that perhaps we should be insuring? And the other way around, is there stuff on our insured list that we perhaps we don't need to insure? I mean, I guess that's your ongoing role.
And I think that's the focus of the insurance strategy, is to relook at that whole picture and to say what is the level of risk? What are we prepared to leave off, put on? Could we self-insure? All of those sorts of, what level of excess are we prepared to accept? All of those questions will be covered in the strategy.
And that if you had something on the insured list that was actually going to be very minimal impact on the premium, you'd probably keep it on there. You wouldn't sort of knock something off to save $7.50. Or
Yeah, there are trade-offs, like reserves lose assets through vandalism and other things, but because we have quite a reasonably high excess, they aren't covered by insurance because we're insuring for significant disasters, not the loss of individual assets.
Right, any more questions of Matthew or Simon? Could I just ask a couple of questions to round up, please? How significant is our claims history in terms of the premiums we pay, Matthew? This room has interesting acoustics, doesn't it, actually? Yeah, can I say that? You're hosting me and I'm going to criticise the room. What I've asked Matthew is, does our claims history have any significant impact on the rates, the premiums we pay? Sorry about that. Thank you, Matthew.
Short answer, yes, it can do. Simon's point about what we refer to in the industry as attritional losses. What insurers don't want to do is deal with lots of low-value, high-frequency losses, because that just eats through costs as far as the insurer is concerned. So pitching the deductible level correctly can remove some of those, which has benefits in terms of the rating. The insurers are there really for catastrophe. But yes, if there are significant losses, then that will have an impact. But the advantage of being in the shared procurement is that's looked at across the entire region. So across the entire members. So it sort of dilutes isn't quite the right word, but it does mitigate the impacts of some of those for the group and therefore for the individual councils. But yes, it is absolutely an underwriting factor.
So part of our strategy has to be thinking about how we are performing and actually what we do indeed claim for. Yeah, okay, that's cool. Look, at my final question, Simon, is could you just expand for my benefit, and I hope the rest of the committee, just the next steps around the strategy, which I think, if I could speak on behalf of the committee, I think we've sensed actually becomes really important, bearing in mind that I'm conscious that we will have a new annual renewal process for our insurance later in the year.
At this stage, we're discussing what the insurance strategy might look like with the likes of Aon, and it's likely that they're going to be a strong candidate for that work. But we are definitely, as I understand it, looking to have this ready for certainly in time for the next renewal strategy, the renewal period. So yeah, its cost and the timing of it has yet to be programmed, but it will be, as I understand, it will be over the next 3 or 4 months.
Thank you. Brilliant. Look, I think this committee would be very interested, and I think it would be part of our risk program to understand where that strategy goes to in due course, Simon, so I appreciate that. Look, I take it there's no more questions left for that. Amber, something's the problem? Me again? Well, I tried to do that, but then I got pushed away, so I'm not certain. Okay, so if I can just repeat, sorry, it's not overly directional then, or perhaps it's too much directional. What I have, perhaps I'll just shout. What I have just asked Simon to do is to keep the committee appraised of the progress with the strategy review. I think that's core for us as the committee to be aware of, because ultimately, elsewhere we'll discuss that we have a workshop later for our risk appetite. This is centre for actually how we deal with the risks and how we're prepared to go. So Simon, we do look forward to you returning and giving us a briefing on that. Okay, I think that's thrashed the item today. Matthew, you'll move it. Do I have a seconder? Thank you. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against? Matthew, we send you away with our appreciation. That's been very informative, and look, we look forward to ongoing contact as time goes on. Thank you. Right, I will try and speak with a bold, clear voice. Thank you for telling. It must be my dulcet southern tones that are making it very hard to hear me. Is that right? It is, yes. No, thank you. Appreciate that. Right, can we please move on to paper 8.2? Katie, this is an update on the enterprise risk management activity. Go for it. We're in your hands, Katie.
Kia ora. Just a couple of things that I want to start off with is to draw your attention to the work that I've undertaken recently with our likelihood and consequence risk matrix. The risk response that links in with that. And in particular, the importance of that to drive the conversation that we have with PwC at the Risk Appetite Workshop in April. The consequence table will help us to frame those levels of pain that we're willing to accept, and if we're really clear on what they are, it can help to guide us on setting the appetite. Talking about the appetite, I'm going to be working with, and I refer to it here in the paper, but with CORE to review the strategic risks, and as part of that, come to elected members to actually seek their insights and feedback on what are the top risks that you have in mind that may or may not keep you up at night, but things that are salient and are topical, and we'll be able to feed that through into the work that we have on the appetite session. I guess just one other point that I really want to communicate with you is the threading of risk management and the threading of the practices of risk management throughout the organisation, building the culture and you know, for us actually moving on and being on the journey of improving our risk maturity within the organisation. I'm doing a lot of work in the space of the long-term planning process that's already well underway. So I note that in the report, but it's something that I just want to bring up to this committee because it is a really short road to the end of the 2021 LTP journey, but work has already started in quite some force. That's across the environmental scanning, so to help with the strategic direction setting, as well as asset management planning. And I'll be able to talk to that a little bit more when that paper comes up.
Thank you, Katie. That's great. Look, can I just give you a very quick initial impression to the committee? I was very interested in this paper because it's my first citer on actually what we do here in Gisborne, and I was very encouraged by what I saw. It represents the fact that as a council, we have developed a substantial framework to manage risk, but I think importantly, Katie and I'm looking at the table on page 21 of 66, there's an important table there about the next steps as we, and I would want to say, increase or develop our maturity around management of risk. So I'm greatly encouraged, but I would also say they're necessary. So so that's great, and already actually I've got some great ideas, and I know others may well as to progressing down that journey. So it does mean, for instance, that looking at that second item there, the risk appetite workshop, I've already probably took away Katie's thunder. Apologies for that. The 15th of April looks like a pretty key date for us as a committee, working with PwC and Katie to develop a sense of what do we as a set of governors view and feel about risk. So a really important date for our calendars. Look, can I open this up for questioning, please? We've got the paper. We actually also have the suite of risks, which is important. I suspect this is more at this stage rather than a direct quarterly risk review, more about actually process, but I'm open to both. Are there comments on Katie's paper and process, or are there specific comments you'd like to raise at this point over the range of top risks that we have that she's outlaid in the appendix to the paper? Remember my principle, we're going to meet 3 hours, 1 hour should be on risk, but anyway, that's neither here nor there. Do you have any questions, guys? No? Yeah, go for it, Amber.
A massive question, just page 36 of the attachment. There's no risk owner to the natural environment. I'm just wondering where that's at.
So you want to ask a question about the actual major risks and actually the state of the risk, correct? Okay, so page 36 or 66.
So I respond to that through the chair. That was previously Nick, and so it was updated now that we have Helen Montgomery on board. I just looking at our risk areas and the ownership of those, had a bit of a shuffle around, so we may revisit the risk owners for those areas, just based on core areas of responsibility too.
Thank you, Amber. Is there anything else people would like to raise at this point? That includes management, by the way. We okay? Well, I will say I'm happy with the conversation as long as you recognise the 15th of April is really important. Where I will want to encourage you to have your good voices on and your good government critical eye, which will be really, really important. Okay, go Nadine, welcome.
So just in terms of the link of this work to the review that Katie's undertaken around the asset management practice, what hopefully you can see is how our bow ties and identification of risks and how we're managing them flow into one another. So sitting beneath this was a whole assessment that was initially done by Katie, which identified where we might be red, orange or green. And then she undertakes a deep dive into the particular areas. So there is, a drop-down process that goes to give assurance that we are across things or improving things or need to address things urgently.
Yes, Amber.
My question, there's a lot in here, all the different risks, and they are all interconnected. But when they get separated out like that, you can't see how this one affects that one, affects that one. I imagine it's like some crazy looking. But essentially there could be cascading effects, right? And it's hard to grasp. But I read this and just went, whoa, what if? So yeah, I look forward to the risk appetite. Maybe we get a little bit more of everything connected together and maybe it doesn't look so scary. Thanks.
This is one of the interesting things about an audit and risk committee. It's that we do get to see this full suite, and it's something that I guess is a maturing thing which we need to learn to, so I'm not being critical by the way, but we need to learn to manage on that basis. Because we're probably the only committee that sees them all together in one hit. And it might just reflect ultimately
I'll just give a little bit of background to that. I'm probably the only person around the table that isn't involved with finance. And the last two, This is not an area that I would go towards. So if I'm asking really dumb questions or coming from a different perspective, that'll be why. This is not my strength.
well, this isn't just,
Amber dumb. I'm Amber dumb in this area.
Yeah. Well, actually, good, straightforward, simple questions can actually be very effective, Amber. So I encourage you to ask them. So look, finally, is there anything else that we need to say, Amber? You've reinforced the date of the 15th. I'm heightening the expectation on Nadine and Katie and team over that day, but that's a big day. If that's the case, could I have somebody move the receive the report? Thank you, Amber. Thank you, Riet. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against? Thank you. Right. That's helpful. Where are we up to, guys? Let's see. I just make certain I've got my page right. We're up to page 41, aren't we? Which is the internal audit activity. So again, Melanie, be very welcome. and very keen to hear the direction you need to give us. Thank you.
Thank you. Kia ora koutou. So I just wanted to talk about a couple of things that we've been doing, key things in the internal audit space. And one of those is the ethics and compliance reporting program that we've set up. So essentially that is a whistleblowing service for staff to be able to voice their concerns. And it is actually provided by our employee assistance program, and where staff are actually protected under the Employee Protected Disclosures Act. And it's still in its infancy stage, so we, to support that, we're also looking at a fraud and corruption policy and process that we're working on now to implement and help to support that process going forward. The other one that I wanted to talk about was the data analytics that we've done recently in bank payments. And basically what that's shown is that we have a large volume of transactions that we process in the last financial year, so roughly around 16,000 transactions. And from that data analytics, we were able to narrow down and analyse further any clusters, relationship clusters, and what those are basically one-to-one or many-to-one relationships, where it shows a link between an account and a payee. So we were able to further analyse those. Also the duplicate payments, we were able to look at the groups that came through from that, and basically similar amounts to the same payee over a very short period of time. We also looked at the largest payment we made in one day, which was actually a batch payment, and the reasons why it was so large. And that was basically because it was a payment run, and we had just had the Queen's Birthday floods. So we looked into all of these, and I guess what it has shown is that our control environment and the processes and practices that we have in place are working as they should in that area. Thank you.
Pat.
How frequently does it happen, and who knows if it can follow up?
So we're just going through now and looking at what we've done in the last 6 to 12 months, and we've got those reviews on our work program. So we are going back to re-review those reviews that we did last year. Yeah. Mm.
The other one was 9 on that page with respect to those I can understand challenge. But can you please explain what screw up with that?
Well, basically, it was just an increase in the amount of koha payments that we had at the time. So in the last 3 to 4 months, there's been a huge increase due to different huis around the district. And we realised that there were lots of different practices and people weren't following the IRD guidelines. And basically, the koha is an unconditional payment where you don't receive anything in return. So if there's a service or a good, it's not a koha. So we held quite a few workshops. We have now a guidelines booklet and a form that they fill out, and it goes through our Māori engagement officer.
Those are just a couple of examples of potential holes in the system that an audit and risk committee, should be being alerted to. And I see, and it's great, the appendix to that paper, which shows the red, the traffic light. And once we get this, and this is back to the chair now, once we get this system up and running, some of us are familiar with quite rigorous reporting against that traffic light system once we've identified exactly what the risk items are. Is that where you're expecting to get this committee's reporting?
Look, Pat, yes, agree with you. And that's what I will, I guess, increasingly start to understand. And look, in fairness, I haven't discussed this all with Melanie yet in terms of what might be my expectation. But I am very encouraged, firstly, that we have Melanie on board and we are doing active internal audit. If we didn't have that, I would suggest we would be at substantial risk of a greater set of issues. So certainly out of internal audit, I am used to us knowing what are the recommendations, what's the clearance rate, and what's outstanding and why. And I think that's important ultimately somewhere down the track, Melanie, that we do that, although I think the schedule you've got gives a sense of some of the stuff that you've actually been going on. So in terms of this committee being aware of it, Pat, I think that is absolutely quite correct. And we can look at that as we develop our program and approach here within the committee. Are there any other questions on top of this, guys? I just have probably a couple, if that's okay, please. Well, actually, probably just a statement. Can I again say well done to you at Gisborne for having had Deloitte undertake this analytics? Can I just stress the context? You have asked Deloitte to look at effectively a very reputable program that has looked at all your payments. And it has focused the attention through the analytics on what we might call are the odd or those features of the payments made that need to be reviewed. And actually that's been followed through on. And we have to acknowledge in paragraph 27 that there is one double payment. So do we choose to see that as a positive or a negative? The double payment's a negative. The fact that actually we have spent $168 million with whatever, 16,000 transactions, and we have certainly, undeniably, one problem, is actually quite good news. Are we going to take strong assurance out of that? I'd like to argue that we should. Go back to my point. This is about achieving our objectives, and our objectives are to be safe and secure, to live up to Section 101 of the Local Government Act, that we are prudent managers. And yes, we have one issue, but we only have one. Now, that's only as good as the transactions that we've had in the past year. So we've got to keep being vigilant, but I think that's really important. And I just wanted to draw our attention to the fact that we are looking at a lot of what we put out the door, Nadine, and actually, yes, one issue to deal with, but it's actually relatively minor. Yes, Ria.
I think it's for James, where we talk, I've seen in the bathrooms, behind the bathroom stalls, in the bathroom.
I have now too. I know what you're going to say.
Where it says, hey, I have not seen James there, but talking about the whistle blowing, and if you see something, let us know. And I see you've done some training with some managers. Mel, have you done the training? When I read this, I wondered how many people do come forward with staff where they might say, oh, that one took that home, or someone took some printer paper. You know what I'm trying to say? We're also talking about the small stuff because that's set the culture for the big stuff. So I was just thinking, do you get the odd complaint or the odd whistleblower? I know whistleblower is a big, sounds like CIA, but it is, do you get the smaller stuff that then flush out the bigger stuff, or do you expect more now that you've done the training and put it up in the toilet stalls?
Yeah, I think the internal audit team and Deloitte have done an amazing job of raising the awareness around fraud and providing service through our EAP to actually be a whistleblower. We've had it in place for about 4 months now, I think. And I think the education around it is we're probably not looking for the pen thieves. We're looking for, quite important things. So we haven't seen anyone take it up in a minor sense and nor in a larger sense yet. The service is confidential and they'll alert us if there's something, and they'll provide a confidential report that will go directly to the chief executive. So it's just about having those systems and processes in place. So I guess to answer your question, we haven't had anyone take it up yet, but people have been well educated that that service is there. It's private, confidential, total autonomy, and it keeps everyone safe. And, yeah.
Yes, Larry.
Yeah, just a question on that. Could you give us an example of what kind of fraud or corruption that maybe at a higher level that you'd get nowadays? I mean, you don't have cash transactions or anything like that, but yeah, maybe.
Yeah, so The fraud that we're seeing nowadays, or it's actually more prevalent, is the trusted advisor. So it could be a person that's been in the role for a very long time, knows the systems. So it's not necessarily at the high level. It's sort of the lower, and they get and because they're trusted, they get away with false invoicing or making payments to their bank accounts, that sort of thing. So yeah, there is a profile as well
They can
around.
do transfers and bank accounts and everything.
Well, no, we have processes in place that wouldn't happen, but that's the level, that's the type of fraud that is occurring. There was a case recently locally that.
Larry, the high-end frauds that are well known in the public sector involved a number of things. The Otago District Health Board was collusion. Very smart operator, but also externally having a semi-credible supply, for which 17 million was channeled through. The Needham City fraud case, which was very sad because the perpetrator committed suicide, was in effect council letting itself down in terms of the systems and not checking, not asking the obvious questions. So it's a combination of everything. So certainly with regard to the latter, well, actually, I suppose, that was picked up because they did decent work around their insurance schedule. They actually started looking carefully at their insurances and couldn't work out why they were insuring so many cars, because the cars that were at the centre of the fraud were never taken off the insurance register. So a slip up there. So, I mean, we can, as I said, great work around Deloitte's, for instance, with the Deloitte's staff, Larry, but it's only good for the time that we've reviewed. And we have to keep vigilant. Sorry, Andy, I think you had a point.
Yeah, but the whistleblowing has a wider function, doesn't it? It's also about
Yes.
bullying and all that,
Yes.
all those other aspects of getting a good culture.
Yeah. My assumption, and can I check this with you, James, is that clearly from a whistleblowing perspective, we have to be very sensitive that it's to encourage and make it safe for a person to raise an issue, and therefore we should be very careful about that. Do we receive any report about the number of incidences of contact with EAP?
We do, yep. We get a complete report from them about as well as the invoices.
I fully respect on an anonymous basis, so I'm talking about figures, which may go some way to understanding what is the nature of the
health of the organisation as well.
Yeah,
it does indicate at a very, I guess, a frank level how things are going, and because it is quite a wide brief, it could be for a multitude of different things. We do get some reporting to say this was in this particular sphere of what they do for us, and we haven't seen anything come through on the whistleblowing for, say, fraud. There's nothing in that category, but they do provide quite good reporting.
Which makes me perhaps want to make my last statement here, Melanie. I do appreciate the fact that you are indicating to us all the various reviews that are going on. You've indicated NZTA, I think it is about to do a review or has done a review. I want to encourage us as governors of risk to recognise we have to try and assemble in our heads, if not on paper, the weight of evidence that suggests that we have got our risk being managed. So hearing those, getting these updates from you is just so important, Melanie, that I appreciate that. Do I have anybody, would somebody like to move, subject to there being no further questions? Thank you, Pat, who would like to second? Thank you, Andy. And so we should check what we're actually moving. I think it's to receive the report. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against? Carried. Thank you very much. I want to check in terms of time. We have our guests here for the workshop. Is that right?
We're going to live stream the chickens.
Oh, okay. Well, if we can.
I can text them, so they
Yeah.
if you head out into, I can text them and say.
Yes. But I think we would want to get through our program before.
Yes.
I wouldn't want to adjourn. So if it's first time for us, first time for me. I'm sorry if I might have to apologise directly. It's expecting to be here now, but I think it would be useful for us to keep going on this paper. So.
then you get pressure at the end of the day. So if I
Yeah.
then suggest we go back to the 1 o'clock.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Well, thank you for raising that. It certainly is a reasonably late start. So again, we're learning, aren't we? So we'll take it forward. Could I move us, please, to Katie's paper on strategic risk of asset management? Katie, I think you're going to give us a short presentation first before we have a discussion. What's best? Let you deal with the presentation first and then take questions, or do you want them as we go through it, Katie? Okay, brilliant. Thank you.
Sorry, I'm very excited. It's great to see and I don't even need to introduce it, but the insurance and the linkage with asset management, and we're going to go over some of that today. And it is really complex, but I'm going to run you through the strategic risk review, which includes my observations, the recommendations, and some progress to date in this space. So, I think for me, there's kind of a statement here that encapsulates the value of asset management, and it's to our communities that we're delivering services to. It's for now and into the future. It's so our children can play and swim and bike. It allows us to flush our toilets at the push of a button and drink fresh water straight from the tap. Creating this value for our communities is a core part of asset management. So having insights of our asset data, a really clear understanding of our changing environment, including our climate, knowing where our growth is and our drivers and demand for that, also understanding our history and being able to forecast future scenarios, are all important aspects to developing assets, which will deliver the quality services both for now and into the future. So, asset management at council, there's a well-known saying that Gisborne is a city in splendid isolation. We are a small city, but we're in a country that's placed on the edge of the world. And living on the edge of the world is not just some lyrics from an Aerosmith song, but it's a term for our position on top of the continent of Zealandia. So you might ask, why is this important? How does it relate to infrastructure and asset management? Well, it does relate, and it's really important, especially the Hikurangi Trench, which sits not far out from this coast, 60 to 90 kilometres away, and that's closer than from here to Wairoa, which is a trench, a continuation of the deeper Kermadec Trench. But there's a number of potential natural hazards that come from this, and that's through the movement of the tectonic plates. There are things such as earthquakes, tsunamis, volcanic eruption. We saw just recently the Whakaari White Island activity on the 9th of December, which was absolutely devastating and shows what Mother Nature can do to us. So we're very much in the Pacific Ring of Fire. It's active. It accounts for 90% of all the world's earthquakes, 75% of all volcanic eruptions, and 80% of all tsunamis. So we're in a very active space. But natural hazards is just one part of the equation. That's asset management. There's a whakatauki, ka mua, ka muri, walking backwards into the future. If we look back here in Gisborne, we have had 3 to 4 large tsunamis as high as 12 metres over the last 1,200 years. As you know, we've recently released our newly modelled Tsunami Maps for Gisborne. And these maps show the potential impact on hundreds of millions of dollars of council infrastructure and the potential to displace thousands of people from their homes. Coupled with that, we have our climate change NIWA study, which I believe is about to be underway. And I think it's pretty clear for us all to see that the implications for our assets with these two quite critical pieces of work are really significant. In 2018, that LTP, we committed to investing over $1 billion for the next 30 years in our infrastructure capital investment. If you add the operating expenditure into that, that's $3 billion. So the investment decisions that we make, or that we did make, and that LTP were actually on the previous requirements of the LGA, which were to deliver infrastructure and services in a cost-effective manner. But with the recent changes to the LGA and the readoption back of the 4 well-beings, we now have that intentional shift away to be looking at how we can develop and create value for the social, cultural, economic, and environmental benefit to our communities. So setting the strategic direction and priorities will guide our 2021 investment decisions and will shape our infrastructure strategy and asset management planning and give us the opportunity to create that value now and an alignment for Taira for the 2050 spatial plan. I'd just like to draw our attention really briefly to an example of asset management in Japan. The Japanese Tohoku 2011 earthquake and tsunami highlighted an example of the ultimate and future well-being and safety culture in asset management. There is a nuclear power plant in Onagawa. It was built and operated with natural hazards and safety in mind at all levels. The plant's engineer, Yanosuke Hirai, employed a futurist mindset, and he had a really deep sense of responsibility. He walked ka mua, ka muri. He designed this plant beyond the regulations. He defied the authorities to ensure the plant would withstand a tsunami, as had previously destroyed the local region in 869. So this took a lot of courage and foresight for him to go beyond the regulations. But it was at his insistence and evidence and persuasion that the additional engineering improvements were made. Also important to note, the staff were well trained and prepared for a containment exercise. So it really permeated throughout this whole power plant. So there were 3 nuclear power plants that withstood the brunt of the 2011 earthquake. They all had very similar reactors, dates of operation, and answered to the same regulatory bodies, but in the end, their fates were really different. The contrasting power plant, which I'm sure we're all aware of, is Fukushima, and the devastation there was phenomenal. The tsunami travelled many miles and exceeded the seawall that they had actually minimised in terms of their design for the asset for cost efficiency. That seawall could not withstand the wave that was coming at them, and in the end, the sea actually came in and caused a failure of the cooling system, kind of disrupted the whole thing. Fuel rods were starting to melt down, and the resulting part of that was the radiation and the land into the sea, and the effects of that are still being reported today. So if we compare that to Hirai's Onagawa power plant, which remained generally intact, was a refuge for hundreds of people, you can see that asset design for well-being for future generations is critically important. Interestingly, the analysis following the earthquake and the disaster at Fukushima found that the operator, regulatory bodies, and the government body promoting the nuclear power industry all failed to correctly develop the most basic safety requirements, such as assessing the probability of damage and preparing for containing collateral damage from such a disaster. So multiple failures. Asset management at council. So we last calculated our maximum probable loss of assets in 2016. We've just heard from Matthew Wilson, knowing our risk and actually really knowing our asset data is absolutely key here. It's being transparent and it's making sure that this data is accurate. The last study was prepared with council data, engineer consultants Tonkin and Taylor, and Aon, and it looks at earthquake and tsunami loss estimates. So in light of the recent tsunami modelling, which is a 1 in 2,500 year event, this will be looked at again. It is a significant piece of work, but it's all the components are there to have a review of that. As you know, we're also seeking Aon to advise us through the insurance review so that we can, be carefully informed of next steps there, especially with some of the conditions that we hear about with the hardening insurance market. And of course, the risk appetite session, which is coming up, which will further help to form and shape some of the decisions that we make and the risk position that we're willing to take. So turning to the asset review, I conducted meetings with the 3 asset teams here, which are our water infrastructure team, livable communities and roading, and obviously reading the key documents. And as you can see, the risk event is the failure to provide safe, affordable and sustainable assets that the community expects in the long term. There's 5 causes and 5 consequences, each with a whole stack of controls that I have talked to the teams about. So one thing I just wanted to note that our council faces a challenge that is similar for all other councils, and that's the affordability issue, how to manage our district's ability to pay for essential services that they require. So the observations, there are a number made during the review, and I've grouped them into 3 main areas. But as you can see with the assurance map, there's all the detail there, and it's really important because I do believe a lot of the interesting stuff can be lost in me grouping it up to this level, but so please, happy to take questions. The first point is that we have no asset management policy, strategy and strategic comms plan for our asset work program. Asset management has historically been driven by financial affordability rather than the asset life cycle methodology and optimal maintenance programming. We have also had a lack of clarity of the trade-offs and risks that we accept when we defer asset renewals or repairs and maintenance. This lack of clarity also extends to the suboptimal transparency and reporting to management and governance for oversight of this. And we need to have systems that can model and store scenarios that will enable us to prioritize and make effective long-term decisions. The second point up there, people and capability. The asset culture that we have is that there are kind of 3 areas that do things their own way. So there are some kind of poor shared practices. Up until recently, we had no formal coordination of asset management planning across council, and we have been heavily reliant on external consultants to come in and to advise and train and prepare and review for the 3-yearly asset management planning cycle. But we run the risk there that these people are external. It is building that asset culture within our own staff that's really important. And the third point, monitoring and reporting. We don't currently report our asset management plans to governance. Some councils do, some councils don't. There is no right or wrong on that, we just don't. And we do report on work programs, but they're within different forums. So we have our major projects update, we have quarterly reporting in our capital works program, but kind of not a holistic view of whether or not we're achieving against the improvement plans within the YAMPs, and also whether or not the improvements and progress links in and shows that correlation to the infrastructure strategy. So the recommendations. I have presented all of this to core management in October and then in December as the work has progressed. The first improvements that I'm suggesting is to our policy strategy and strategic comms. It's a really critical component. It would align with the ISO asset standard as well as the New Zealand Asset Management Support Group, NAMS. It's to have a policy and a strategy. It would ensure consistency across the organisation, that we know the principles of asset management, and it can help to guide us to drive effective asset management practices. Yeah. No. No problem. Yeah, I have the improvement areas. I'm just not on my docs assembler, but it's point 10. Page 52, yeah. But I'm kind of just drawing out some more of the detail and that, so that you can, right. Sure. And yeah, so a strategic comms plan to help integrate our approach to the work that we're doing, that's across our external stakeholders and obviously the community on the asset and the capital works program. We really need to place value and importance on this. The second point is strong leadership to drive these improvements. So I'm recommending that we establish an asset advisory group internally to help centralise asset practices within council, and I'm recommending that this is led by a director. The recommendation has been presented to core. We're just yet to confirm the lead director of that. But the advisory group would be tasked with developing the asset management policy, which would be principles based, would help to inform the development of the asset and infrastructure strategy, and obviously to support the asset management practices. So for our staff that are working in this space. And I think when you look across the organisation, there are a lot of people that feed into asset management. So I'm also suggesting asset leadership needs to have a formal learning management system in place so that we can ensure this continual maturity and improvement for the teams. What I can say in terms of progress is the asset teams are now actively developing their plans for the 2021 LTP. It started really early, and that's in response to the review that we had of the last LTP. I feel that, yeah, there's just some really, really great progress being made with the staff and promoting that, prioritising and promoting that work. And the final point, which is monitoring and reporting. So it's my view that we have to shake ourselves of the old cost efficiency driver, a local government, to ensure that we're actually managing our assets in line with the four well-beings. And if we can do this, we'll be going beyond just simply having an efficient asset to an asset that is promoting the well-being and prioritises safety and design and affordability. One thing to note in this section is we have, I recommend that we support the business intelligence tool. This would be a new tool for the team. It would allow them greater insights into their data, removes a lot of manual processes and obviously the human error from that, but it would allow quick and standardised reporting at the click of a button. So the water asset management plan template has been started, but the business intelligence team are still in the discovery phase for that. So it's about, at the moment, timeframe yet to be confirmed, but it's about six to 8 months and that tool being confirmed for the team, but it would be transformational. We have a lot of asset information that we are capturing in our system, IPS8, and being able to carefully and quickly pull things together to show us scenarios and how things might look so that we can then cost it is really valuable for the team. It's a lot of legwork at the moment. It takes up a lot of time. So yeah, that's my presentation. I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you for that, Katie. Can I just, before I open up the question, I just suggest I'd like to invite 2 people just to respond. David, I understand this has probably been part of your area of concern. I wonder if you would choose, you're welcome to, you can pass, but if there's anything you'd like to respond to in terms of that. And Dean, there is some firm recommendations here from Katie around a level of organisation internally with management. I wonder whether you might choose to make any comments. So David, if you had anything you want to say, you're welcome to say those now.
Thank you, Bruce. For Lifeline's asset management is a core fundamental of our business. So as some of the councillors, or the councillors, sorry, are aware, when we brought Journeys back in-house, so our roading department, one of the key fundamentals was to split out our asset management from our day-to-day operations. So with both of our water teams and our Journeys team or roading, asset management is part of a set team, which we've undertaken some quite aggressive recruitment in that area. So for Journeys, we've added in one of our asset managers we had moved on to another role. We've replaced that person with 2 quite competent asset managers. I did turn it on. So we have upskilled in our asset management. As Katie Kay said, we have moved quite early in developing up our asset plans to inform the long-term plan and our infrastructure strategy. And one of the things that we're doing very heavily is developing those in-house. So they're in-house documents that are being done by staff who are sitting down with activity managers, making sure that we have sufficient detail to inform the asset management plans for Lifelines, given the assets, understanding what that means for us more, and ensuring that that's driving our work program that's going into the long-term plan. So over the last sort of 12 months, we've very much focused our hub on how we can implement some of the changes that have been recommended and making sure that we're building up our capability where we can, but then also bringing in external experts to help us with that as well. I suppose the last point I'd make is the condition assessment that feeds into the asset management. The last long-term plan put budget back into the department to be able to start investigating our assets, doing more condition assessments. For councillors, that's our camera TV of the wastewater sewer networks to actually understand those condition assessments. Also, at the same time, we're in the enviable position in our Land Rivers and Coastal team where we have 3 Land Rivers engineers, which is quite unheard of for this council to back up to that stage. Most councils. So we have very good depth in our asset managers and our asset condition assessors for things. So we are actually being able to build up quite a rich base of knowledge to then inform the asset management plans that are being developed up as well.
Thank you for that, David. That's very insightful. Thank you for me to hear that. Nadine, is there anything you'd want to add?
Mainly just in terms, so this is our first kind of deep dive into one of the strategic risk assessment areas, and I think it's really useful and can be somewhat confronting for asset managers in terms of their practice and the areas that need to be improved. And I think the recommendations here are ones that we can pick up on. In terms of the communications area, I think that's one, just by way of expanding that out, is that, and if you've had a good chance to go through that, it is around that contractors also being privy and engaging with our stakeholders. So how do we get that line of sight kind of connection in so that our community are aware of what we're doing and we have got that visibility too and are encouraging our contractors and being on the same page around what we share in terms of our vision and objectives of the overall community. I think the other thing about this is what was really clear that came through too is around how the financial imperatives have been driving the work program. And that's a direct result of staff actually, you know, taking on board where we need to go in terms of the affordability challenges. That's a change that we can't do on our own. That's a strategic challenge here for governance. And so I think that's around your priorities, your focus, and where you're going to put that emphasis in terms of your investment on behalf of the community. I think there's another part in here around building flex into our system so that we can manage the day-to-day around asset management. But there are demands that come up on a day-to-day basis which seem to sometimes drive that work program and our focus. And when we get requests, our request for services system that diverts energy away from asset management into doing other side stuff that detracts us from what we should be doing. That's not to say we shouldn't be doing that, it's just how do we focus and build flex in the system so that we can be responsive as well as cynical. So a lot of things to reflect on and actions to be taken to improve in some of the areas.
That's tremendous. So thank you, David and Dean. That's very helpful to get a sense of what's happened as a result of Katie's report so far. So I can open it up for questions for members. Feel free to raise your questions. Yes, Amber.
I never thought I'd get excited with this paper, but I did. Thank you, Katie. I can now understand your excitement. There are a couple of things I noted is it is really frustrating as a local governor when we get dictated to by central government and a shift from cost effective to the full wellbeings. It really does make a lot of work for us at the local level, and it does make me wonder how much should we listen to those directives that come from the top, and maybe we should take our own interpretations of things at time. And I really do like the connectivity you're drawing in the paper and how you spoke. Because the reality is we take in clean water, we make it dirty, and if we don't look after those assets, it degrades our environment. And seeing all that connectivity together is really, really valuable, I find anyway, because I do find a lot of stuff is very siloed and detached. So when we say four waters, we really should just talk about water. It is all water in its essence. We make it clean to drink, then we make it dirty. So thank you, Katie. That was really, really awesome to see all of that stuff come together and make it understandable. It's awesome.
Okay, so a good word of support, but the people got questions of these people that we'd like to raise at this stage. Nobody? Well, I have. Oh, Pat, you go first, please.
Thank you. No, I appreciate the paper. I would really like some of the script that was provided to be in the paper, but that's more about how the paper is put together. So thank you very much for the work that's gone into it. So it's more about the presentation and a couple of queries, because in actual fact, in the presentation, Katie made some recommendations, and there are no recommendations in this paper. It's simply a noting report. So there are recommendations to management, yes. So we just need to be clear about the focus of the paper. Looking at the intelligent infrastructure, I've written myself some notes, because I just think there's a few areas that I'm aware of that we aren't delivering on as well as we ought to at the moment, and I won't perhaps highlight them specifically, but I'd just like, those 14 risk themes cover, it seems to me, most of the work that we're required to do in this organisation. Well, I trust it does, but there are a few things we aren't doing particularly well, so I just maybe have a chat later, and I just want to think that that's a really good template and it's been put up, but I hope it's not just, and this is probably drawn to management, Katie's put it up, but it's just not a really nice glossy piece of paper, and we still go on not delivering as well as we should in some of our key tasks.
Are you, through the chair, referring to this one?
Well, I think I'm referring to the appendix that's attached which says asset management strategic risks. It's an appendix to the
Yeah,
paper
so,
that Kathy just
so
given
if
us.
I just explain the 14 themes that you've seen there, the attachment is a deep dive into our asset management. So there was an assessment undertaken. So over the course of the the Audit and Risk Committee, you will be seeing deep dives on each of the areas, recommendations, and I'm assuming our chair will want us to be bringing back progress reports on how we're implementing what we're doing in this area.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that entirely. But can I just have a supplementary on that? Because the heading on that page is risk management and total assurance. And so while a lot of our conversation has been about our strategic assets and how we manage them, this is about total assurance. So I take it that we're also going to cover off delivery, and we're not performing the role of an audit and risk committee unless we do cover off delivery in due course. I mean, that might be coming next. So I think you can hear what I'm saying. I just have an expectation that this committee is actually going to deal to some delivery issues as well, or otherwise we're failing the organisation. So we've looked certainly at assets, which are a big chunk. But if you look at what the top of that heading says, we've got some items in there that we need to have identified, and management may be choosing what they are. But to make sure this committee functions as it should, we should know about.
Thank you for the advice, Pat, and I agree. Absolutely. But this is a study at the front end of asset management, not at the
The
delivery.
heading's not about asset management.
Well, okay, the substance of the paper has been simply around, do we actually plan sustainably for our assets? I also agree with you, Pat, that actually there is also a risk that relates around, do we deliver? So that's everything from CapEx delivery through to effectively, you've already raised it before, the request for service system, and actually the customer experience, if I can use a good Wellington phrase. So I agree, we need to hear about that at this later, but this is about actually that front end. Do we actually know what we should be doing with our assets? Yeah, James, you've got a point, please.
Sorry, just through the chair, can I just make clear that page 56 is a restatement of the framework? So that's the asset management, the risk management framework that we're working within. You've seen this before, and it's in the earlier paper. And also just the point that service delivery is identified as a separate strategic risk area at number 8 as well. So in the fullness of time, you'll have a deep dive conducted in that space, which will give you a picture of how well we're doing in that area and what the total assurance is associated with that. So just
But
so
some of
if
it's
that wasn't
policy
clear.
too. I mean, I'm thinking policy as well. I appreciate what that says. Thank you. This is on, we don't lose sight of it. Thank you.
Amber.
Yeah, just one more thing I wanted to say about communications. There's the language that we use internally, whether it's engineering, science, whatever, but we do need to be mindful that when we go to the public, we need a completely different type of language that they can targeted to our audience, I guess is what I'm saying. Our comms inside is not the same as what we take outside, and I just wanted to raise that because I see it all the time. And when it goes to, when we're talking about our community and the people who are the beneficiaries of what we do, it is nice to put in the language that they get, not i.e. repairability or something like that, that you've got to take a deep dive just to understand that word. So I just wanted to raise that, there's going to the community.
Okay, are there any more questions that yes, Ria?
Observation that caught my eye, number 9 under discussions and options. When I read this paper, in the last sentence that says this control was included as asset managers highlighted that financial sustainability drives the asset program as opposed to the asset need. When I read that, I thought, will we ever have enough money to look after our assets the way that the assets deserved to be looked after? You understand what I'm trying to say? It's because that is just so true. We have a certain pot of money and we cannot, even if we wanted to, look after the assets like they deserve, or not deserve, like we would want to. The financial constraint always sits there and you have to prioritize, and there's always a loser. And it's the reality. It doesn't matter how we dress it up, it's not going to change. So we need to be clever how we prioritize the finances with our assets, because I don't think we're ever going to be in a situation where we have enough kutia to just do it all the way it should, or the way we would think it needs to be done on paper.
So I think my sort of somewhat, when I say cold read, because obviously I'm only now learning a bit more about Gisborne, is actually the problem, Riet, is that you still haven't identified all that you should do before you even consider what is the money. And I think the challenge here from Katie's review is actually, do we have the condition information? Do we have modelling of what the performance of the asset is like and what its genuine renewal need, maintenance and renewal needs are going forward? Because actually, that is probably a program that would be scary to look at. But the point is, if I've read Katie's report right, we don't know what that is yet. We do know that you won't have the money for it. But the point is, actually, so then how do you prioritise? If you don't know all the issues that are associated with your network and in terms of its performance, thanks, Larry, how do you then prioritise, or more importantly, how do you know you're prioritising on the right stuff? So this is quite a fundamental set of findings that I see, unless I'm seeing it wrong, Katie, and you disabuse me of my views, Riet. The critical issue here is, are we up for looking with the data at the real issues of maintaining these and renewing them, let alone how do we deal in terms of funding? Riet.
And that is even more scary, what you just said, that we don't know some of the things which is just normal not to know, and we will find that out. Once we know all of that, we can prioritise. But that also made me think, once we have all our information and we know how much money we have, a bigger discussion might be, we talk about levels of service. We talk about certain services that we do offer, or certain services that we see, once we prioritise, we just cannot offer that. And I think that is also one of the discussions later, once you have everything, when you prioritise, is to realise it's not going to be all roses and sunshine. It might be difficult discussions to have when we talk about levels of service and what we as a community can afford.
So but I just want to go back to the fact, the core risk is, given we're not a risk committee, because you're right, sorry, I absolutely agree. But Katie's report is highlighting for us the risk that that conversation won't be necessarily the right one until we have the right data. Now, that's a phrase that most governors around the country don't like hearing, because it sounds like I've got to spend more money. The good news is, from what I've heard from Nadine and David, is that you are moving to maximise the quality of the data and the scenario planning that you can bring to the table. What I think, Riet, you're also shown is we needed to soften ourselves up for the fact that there will be a hard discussion about how we merge the two. And I take it the other thing that we are doing here, because I'm conscious of the long-term plan screaming down madly at us, is that regardless of the sort of the three big suite, or the suite of three big recommendations that we have on the screen in front of us, you're doing this other stuff that has come out of the asset management plan, which will automatically help us be in a better position to debate the LPP. That's good news. Okay, that's cool. That's cool. Okay. Well, sorry, that's, yeah. Agreed. Yeah.
Is absolutely valid and has been around each time too. So council officers, we are building on that level of information.
Thanks. You said it better than I have. That's what I was trying to say, Pat. That's actually right, is that we are, that good stuff has been done since the last LDP to help improve. But there is quite frankly more that Katie's hinting at, and it's going to be much more around how do we get ourselves onto that proactive understanding the future performance of our asset, and when we need to do renewals, then the tough question, can we afford that? Okay. Sorry, I had somebody, Amber?
Say exactly what you said. Being cognizant of this very fact is important in itself.
Yeah.
And thank you for raising that, because unless it's actually put in front of you, you don't actually think about it that way. So I think it's really valuable, and just in that light.
So I'm conscious of our time, and I don't want to necessarily cull it, but I sense that we're getting to a good level of understanding about what the actual importance is. I hope we've picked that up from your perspective, Katie, and that's really good. Could you help me, please, understand a couple of things? How do we track that these recommendations are being delivered on over time? Because these aren't quick fixes. I mean, at a very simple level, some are known. You've restructured, so to speak. I'll use that in a small term. We've got an infrastructure team with a dedicated group of asset management planners. So I think we tick that. How do we follow through in the life of this? What is for us, firstly, a top risk? It's number 9. So it's a risk that we, as a committee, should have a cider of. And when's the follow-up review?
Mr. Chairman, can I suggest we move receipt of the paper, which we haven't done yet, and I would think that a work program will now be in the front of this agenda. That's the first meeting of this committee, and that will pick up some of the recommendations, or all of them, if management choose to make the report to council in that way. And then we can follow, because it's just, in our other agendas, it's a separate page. We can follow the progress against those and can be reported on. And it says it's going to take 2 months, 3 months, 5 months. Be done next time. A work plan.
Okay, can I? I'm sorry, I'm obviously stepping across toes here. I thought my question was quite valid, so that I could actually agree to the paper being received. I just would like to know how this is going to be followed up, but I'm happy to take that offline, because I just wanted to reflect. I think it was a point that you made earlier, Pat. How do we follow this up? And that's what I'd like to know. But I can deal with that offline. Do I have a person that's prepared to move the paper? Thank you very much. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Thank you. Well, if I've got to the end of my, I think we've got to page 66, which suggests that if we take a short break. That concludes the meeting. Thank you, Heather. I need to say that officially. That concludes the meeting, and but we will break for, how long would it take our guests to arrive? Shouldn't be too far away. Do you want to break for a quarter of an hour, 10 minutes, quarter of an hour? Does that make sense? And we will reconvene therefore at 3:45, and we will meet with Gisborne and also hear from Unidine and talk about the audit. Thank you very much.